Bonjour, buongiorno, buenos dias. I'm afraid I don't speak German. I'm going to put it on the list, though, because Germany is certainly a very interesting market in Europe today, as I think we all know in the room. So I am going to talk to you today in the 15 minutes we have about the cannabis industry on a global scale. And mind you, given the global scale, it is going to be very challenging to do in 15 minutes. So a couple of caveats. One, the presentation is available to you through the app, so you'll see a lot of charts, and I'll speak relatively quickly with an accent. So no worries, everything is on the app and you can read it at your leisure. Two, I am going to keep it very macro level, but later today at around 12:15, I believe, when we have the roundtable, I'll be more than happy to go into more details in terms of each of the markets or any questions specifically about import exports or more of the regulatory framework or lack thereof. So, who am I? I am Giadha DeCarcer. I'm the founder, former CEO, currently executive chair, I got promoted, of New Frontier Data. New Frontier Data is today, I'm proud to say, the most trusted and respected reporting company in the cannabis industry on a global scale. We report on over 100 nations. We have an earned media reach of over 16 billion across the globe. I founded the company in 2014, and it has been quite the journey. In fact, I remember my first presentation, November of 2014, and I entered the room, and it definitely didn't look like this. There was a big cloud of smoke. I was the only person wearing a suit. I stood out like a sore thumb. I started putting pictures in my business cards because people forgot they had met me, and I think I have a great personality. It's just that they were high. So after almost a decade, it's really exciting for me to be in Europe, especially because I am from Europe. Well, New Frontier Data is based in Washington, D.C., with offices in Denver, London, and now we have a presence in Kenya as well as in Latin America. I am originally from Italy, and where I am now currently based. And very excited to see that in just such a short time, since 2014, the European market now is expanding at faster than the rate that we saw originally North America expanding. So I'll talk a little bit about that today. The global state of legal cannabis. In 2014, when I first started the company, there were 8 states that were in the process of legalizing. Really, when we talked about legal cannabis, it was primarily medical, with Colorado and California looking at recreational, and then, of course, we had the Netherlands. Canada also was looking into it, but really early stage industry. It took about 6 years in the US to get to the point where almost all of the United States are legal, and yet not yet federally legal. In half that time, 70 nations around the world have either decriminalized or legalized cannabis. Quite impressive. In fact, it's a unique phenomenon. Look up any other emerging market that within a decade became as globally viral as this market. To give you a little perspective in terms of what does it mean in terms of numbers, and we are a data company, therefore we like to talk figures. When you look at other large verticals, interestingly enough, verticals that are now beginning to enter the industry as well, cannabis is a over $400 billion industry when you look at consumption and sales in the both legal and illegal market worldwide. So closely behind things like tobacco, fast food, beer, and cosmetics, all of which are looking into this industry today, specifically and especially from Europe multinational companies. So the emergence of a global cannabis economy, what does that mean? Well, interestingly enough, I'm sure we've all followed sort of the declassification in the UN that happened late last year. Before that, there was a recommendation from the World Health Organization, and there were also some regulatory movement here in Europe from the EU perspective. But on the UN side, what's really interesting is that it gives us a little bit of a view of where the market could be in the future. So when you look at how they voted, So green, they voted yes. Pink, they voted no. Gray, they weren't available. What's interesting to this slide is look at Europe. almost all of Europe voted yes. So while not all of those European nations today have legalized or decriminalized, it certainly gives us a vision into how they feel about it, and they may be decriminalizing and legalizing. Now, this is the state of affairs in Europe today. So all green countries have established a medical use market. All blue markets have some sort of test trial pilot program. Amongst them, as you can see, France, Spain, and Ireland, which are very interesting markets that I'll be talking a little bit about later. And then you have in pink what's mostly Eastern Europe still in the cannabis prohibited arena. Nonetheless, when you look at, at the numbers, Europe is the next frontier, tongue-in-cheek. Why? Well, first and foremost, something to keep in mind, most sophisticated manufacturing of cannabis product today still comes from either Canada or Europe. When you look at consumer packaged goods across health and beauty and food and beverage, Europe is a leader. As such, it only makes sense that when you look at cannabis, that is also true. But if we look at other numbers as well, when you look at Europe in terms of population, when you look at Europe in terms of GDP, export, imports, it has massive figures and massive numbers. So while today we can still say that the epicenter of cannabis legal consumption is in US or North America, which includes Canada, the truth of the matter is when we look at the numbers, the future of cannabis consumption does lie in Europe. In fact, I was pleased to see Stephen from Tilray mention a couple of figures about Europe in terms of 100 million potential cannabis consumers. We, in fact, endorsed that number. So something interesting in terms of what I like to call the emergence of regional centers of excellence in the cannabis industry. What does that mean? So I mentioned earlier that the rapid growth and expansion of this legal market has been conducive to some unique phenomena in terms of the competitive environment. Because there was such a large number of countries legalizing at the same time, we've begun to see clusters of expertise in regions around the world. For instance, we do see a lot of Asia Pacific, specifically Australia, along with Israel, really looking to specialize in medical research. And in fact, a lot of innovation in the medical research arena is stemming from there today. We are seeing North America, US specifically, becoming the epicenter of consumption, and therefore anything that has to do with consumer behavior, understanding consumption from a patient and an adult use perspective, really stemming from there. Also, North America concentrating in advancing technology pertinent to the cannabis plant. And then we're seeing Europe with the potential to truly become sort of a center of excellence when it comes to manufacturing, extraction, processing, and everything that has to do with the consumer packaged good journey. And I'm remiss if I don't talk about cultivation. Africa, Asia, and Latin America are emerging as centers where we see cultivation being most prominent because of excellent climate conditions as well as low labor cost. And in fact, when we talk about import-export, what we're beginning to see is imports even into Europe from places like Colombia. So I mentioned a little bit about the medical use in Australia and Israel. What's interesting there in terms of understanding sort of the nascent import-export regulatory framework, and I cannot stress enough nascent, still a lot of movement into what is a fragmented and somewhat volatile import-export regulatory system worldwide. But we are beginning to see some maturation into the rules and regulations in place. As you saw, Tilray is already quite active in the world of import-export, but they're not the only company doing so. I wanted to bring attention to two specific examples. Australia, as I mentioned earlier, really looking to position itself as a center of excellence in medical research. As such, last year, they amended their trading rules in order to be able to export more freely and with more streamlined and timeliness to areas such as North America, Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Interesting to note, a region that was not included there was Europe, which I remain to have a question mark on, and I'm sure that we at New Frontier Data will continue to follow it and study it. But certainly very interesting to see how the government has taken an active position and understands the opportunity that they currently have in terms of exports. Israel, on the other side, began this transformation on the regulatory framework to position also as an exporter earlier on, and as such had massive costs in terms of opportunity costs, in terms of the inability to actually leverage that early import-export regulation in the country. I guess what this speaks to is timing, which is why I stressed nascency. There are massive opportunities for import-export in the cannabis industry today, yes, but each region or regional center of excellence is still trying to find its footing. As such, anyone looking at those types of opportunities should certainly tread carefully because it continues to be a volatile environment. Some highlights, or at least some nations that we are keeping a very close eye at New Frontier data. India, most and foremost, for those of you who don't know, so for the past 30 years, China has been the #1 producer of hemp for fiber cultivation. They are extremely sophisticated. I had the pleasure of actually visiting one of the cultivating centers, which is based out of an entire province in China. And the entire thing is automated and run via drones. It seems like traveling into the future. It's truly incredible. But China has been very slow to understand other applications of hemp, such as CBD extraction, but also some potential advanced industrial applications of hemp when carbonized. Next to it, India, also a very large hemp producer for fiber applications in the world, not as large or sophisticated as China, has begun to open up to other applications for hemp cultivation beyond fiber, such as CBD extraction, but others as well, such as construction. As such, we are keeping a very close eye in what India is going to do. There are at least half a dozen provinces in India that have opened up for cultivation licenses. And as such, we're also beginning to see quite a bit of investment flow from Canada, as well as from the US and from Europe and Australia. France. Well, we know France has been a little ambiguous in terms of embracing cannabis legalization. However, they do have a pilot program. And as a nation, it is a nation that's in a geographic position, but also from a market perspective and expertise at home that could also be very, very interesting in terms of their role to play in the overall European cannabis market. Italy, as we all know, excellent soil for cultivation, and I may be a little biased because I do love some Italian olive oil and wine, because I am Italian and a heavy consumer of both. But that is also, as we've seen in California and as we see in France, very conducive to the cultivation and rich quality of cannabis. Last but not least, Colombia. Colombia has an ideal climate. As well as the expertise and infrastructure for agro and cultivation in general. They also very early on embraced legalization because of the massive problem they had with crime in Colombia. There were cartels that basically ran the country, and they were cultivating illegal cannabis. As we saw mentioned earlier about in terms of what Portugal tried to do in a much larger scale, legalization is something that Colombia embraced to basically push down on cannabis illegal trade. And it worked quite well. While the regulatory system in Colombia is still a bit, let's say, in movement, fluid, and the licensing process is maybe questionable. From a production perspective, is doing quite well. And in fact, we've begun to see imports from Colombia here into Europe. And I always like to end it with the money slide. Whether I'm raising money or educating, whatever it is, we're business people, and we're interested in understanding the flow of funding in and out of the industry. I wanted to bring attention to 3 particular transactions that I think are very illustrative of the dynamic and what's happening in terms of global trends, but also import-export opportunities in terms of who's playing. Canopy growth and acreage. Those of you who follow the industry may be aware that there's a merger, which would make it the first North American conglomerate with a combined market cap of over 17 billion. Tilray, as Stephen mentioned, recently joined forces with Afria, making it the combined market, having a combined market cap of over 8 billion, and also creating the world's largest cannabis company. Last but not least, here close in Europe at home, Flora. Flora made a $2 million, €2 million investment to become the preferred supplier here in Europe. They want to own the distribution infrastructure. They want to be able to provide services to anyone looking to trade inside Europe. And they've done this by partnering with HoshiCap, Portugal, which is part of the Hoshi International Company based in North America. These are all companies bringing lots of funding, lots of experience, lots of sophistication into Europe, but I'm only mentioning those inside the cannabis industry. There are many large multinational companies that are being quieter about their movements, but are putting just as big checks into the space, specifically in food and beverage and health and beauty, some of which the New Frontier Data represents and work with, so I'm not at liberty to speak about, but they are there and they are looking and they are taking steps. I want to leave you, as I said, 15 minutes is not a lot of time to talk about an industry at a global scale such as this one is today's, but we do have a report that we have recently released. In fact, it was released yesterday in honor of the conference, and it is available for you complimentary. You can either visit the URL there, or it's also available through the Think Tank app. That gives a little more granularity into opportunities and risks into this global space. At New Frontier Data, we really pride ourselves for providing unbiased, rigorously researched, fact-based reporting. As such, we're not pro-movement, we're not pro-cannabis, we're not anti-cannabis. We tell it how it is. We've been doing this for almost a decade. And we specifically look as a mission to elevate the discussion in this industry through rigorous fact-based reporting. I like to end it also with our vision, and the vision is simple. All of you in the room, if you have data in the cannabis industry, please talk to me, because we want to be that nexus of information worldwide. If you need data, please come talk to me, because we probably have it, because we've been collecting it for almost a decade. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to speaking to some of you at the roundtable later today.